So we haven't met before, outside of this. And I did some research, to be like, all right, I know who this guy is on campus, but who is he really? And I found some interesting things out there that weren't that hard to dig up, but I was really enthused with some of those things. And the thing that I think that I'm looking at over here on my other screen, this was like,
tell you.
I was like, oh, who's this really cool guy over here with his own Joseph Jefferson signature trombone mouthpiece over here on Giddings Mouthpieces?
Oh, me?
This is incredibly cool. I was like, this guy has his own mouthpiece. That's really cool. So, okay. So right there, I have a question. Next to the mouthpiece, there's like a little swingy...
We are looking at his trombone right now, by the way, for those of us who are only here.
Oh, yeah. We're looking at that. So next, behind the mouthpiece, there's like a little lever type deal.
This right here?
No, like behind it. Like
this?
What does that lever do?
Oh, it just helps with distributing weight.
Oh, okay.
Holding it. So it's just pretty much I can do that.
Okay.
It distributes weight. Rather, if it's not there, it puts a lot of pressure here over the years, and people develop carpal tunnel and different things like that. So, yeah.
See, I was a percussionist throughout my entire life. So whenever it comes to instruments that make different sounds, I'm like, I don't know how those things work. That's incredibly cool. So how did that deal come about where you became a person who has a signature mouthpiece through a company?
Well, I was playing a lot of different mouthpieces, and I was really trying to find something that kind of fit how I particularly play in the music that I play, and kind of something that really was quite versatile with a bunch of different styles. But more importantly, it was the allergic reaction that I started having to different metals, because that mouthpiece is stainless steel. It's surgical stainless steel.
I saw they were hypoallergenic, so I wondered. Yes. Okay.
And so when I was growing up, I had no idea what was going on, football season and all those things. And I would get these cold sores or, these things on my face. And I'm like, what is going on? And so it was an allergy.
Huh.
And so when I found the stainless, I just tried everything, and I tried stainless, and I said, well, first of all, it's not causing my face to have those issues. That's great. Second of all, it has a quality that I really like about it. And so there's a couple of, in the world, there's probably maybe 3 or 4 manufacturers that does stainless steel mouthpieces, because it's quite difficult to manufacture, because it's very hard as opposed to metal or brass.
Sure.
And so Ivan Giddings, he became a friend. And when I was living in Portland, he lives in Washington, but he lives on an island. And so I would have to drive up to Washington and take the ferry over to the island. And I thought that was just the most amazing thing ever. He just called me the other day, by the way. It was pretty amazing. And so we saw what I was playing, and he said, well, let me see if I can make you something that's similar to that. And so we went through all kinds of designs and all different kind of mouthpieces. Oh, that works. That doesn't work. It takes maybe like an hour or so to make the mouthpiece once you've created the code and do all that, and you see it go through the machine and all that stuff. And then I play it. Oh, that's not right. I like something else. Play this, take it home, deal with it. And so after about maybe 3 to 6 months rather, of just kind of working it and kind of figuring it out and tweaking it, we kind of landed on a mouthpiece that I liked. But originally it was just, he was going to make a custom mouthpiece for me and then charge me for the customization of it, like most manufacturers would be. And he was like, well, I really like what you're doing. In terms of being as an educator, in terms of being out there, and then in terms of being a performer, I would like to have you be an artist for us. And those mouthpieces have sold, and they've done quite well. And so I'm very thankful to just kind of have that opportunity. So it really kind of, extends my reach beyond just the classroom teaching. It kind of adds a a different element. You know, it's not nothing that I like broadcast. I mean, of course I put it on like my website and my marketing, because you definitely want to make sure that people are visiting the site and all of those things, branding and those sorts of things. But it has been definitely very beneficial and very helpful to me as a player, and just my quality of life of just kind of having that on my face, so I don't have to have so many issues with that.
When I would think that just going through the process of, you know, you said 3 months of, you know, playing different ones that he was creating or that you were creating together as an educator, that probably gives you a better idea of how a mouthpiece or a certain mouthpiece might work for a certain player. Is that something?
It does, and your lips and your horn, and it was set up for that horn. And so, I mean, here's another prototype. This is a prototype for my large bore that he's done, because I'm not playing stainless on my large bore horn because we haven't kind of found the right fit yet. But I have tons of prototypes, and so it really takes some trust in the person. And it really takes a level of commitment and a level of discernment in terms of with your ears, and being very patient, because the smallest little change can have a drastic effect on it. And we're talking about, you know, hundreds of a, you know, whatever he calls it. And
Sure.
It's like, man, that plays different. Oh, I changed that. Oh, I felt that. And so it's kind of awesome to go through that process. It was a very tedious process. And I really wanted something that I really didn't have to go back and have to keep dealing with it over and over again. And so it was well worth it for sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, well, how does that work out? How do I get my own mouthpiece? How does this go?
Yeah, that's kind of how it worked out. So it's pretty cool.
Well, sticking with the musical theme, this is something that I've always wanted to ask you and haven't. Like, how did you even find the trombone to begin with?
Well, I honestly, a couple of fun facts about me. I honestly wanted to pick the instrument that I felt was going to be the most obnoxious and the one that my mom and dad would not buy into. Okay.
I can believe this about you.
Very clear about that. And you know, I came from very humble beginnings. I had two very hardworking parents, but I came from, you know, getting an instrument was a luxury. And my uncle actually purchased my first trombone. It was like $137. And ironically, it was called, the manufacturer was called Blessing. And I just kind of took that as a sign, because it was absolutely a blessing for me to get an instrument at that time, because that just wasn't, like we like to say in my house, that ain't in the budget. It just wasn't in the budget of things. And so I got that, and I actually started my playing in the church, listening to my mom who sung. I didn't have my first applied lesson until undergrad. And I really took some time off throughout school, and I didn't really get serious about trombone until my 11th grade year. But just playing in church and really developing my ears and the sounds that I wanted to do, and something that really resonated with me with this instrument was the fact that it was very similar to like how my mom would sing, so I could bend pitches. You know, it was very warm. It had this vocal quality to it. And that was something that always really inspired me. And so that's how the trombone kind of came along. Did I know that this was going to be the thing that I was going to do? Absolutely not. It was something that I really had to work at, and I still do work at. But I also had a lot of different areas in my life where I think I could have been quite successful, just in terms of how I deal with people, just in terms of how I, like to talk with people and how I like to navigate. And so now I kind of incorporate all of those things, and the trombone is kind of the vehicle. that allows me to do all those things. And so it came from that 130 some bucks trombone to being able to have the joy to be able to do what I do today. You know, I get to do it every day, you know, and that's something that I'm very intentional about. You know, a lot of people say I have to do this, but I say I get to do this. And that really kind of changes my thought process in terms of what I have to do. We all have very long days, like, oh man, I have to do this. But I say I get to do it. Even though if I have to do this thought process in my mind, but I get to do it. For me, it kind of changes some things so that I can show up and be the best version of myself for my students.
How do you, oh, sorry, George. How do you get them in that mentality that this isn't just school or another project or another concert? They get to do this.
Well, I think, you know, one of my hashtags that I use on my social media is called, you know, I put stay in it, you know, and you just truly have to stay in it. Regardless, no matter what you're doing, you have to stay in it. You have to be a part of the process, even when you're developing. And so one approach that I get my students to really connect with is to understand that there is a personal touch. And I'm very thankful that I had really great teachers and really good mentors. And again, I was very intentional about the places where I went to school, the teachers that I had. And they really poured into me, and they helped and still help to develop me as a person, as a professional. And so in addition to teaching trombone and teaching all the music things, I want to make sure that you're going to be the best person and representative when you leave this space. Because at the end of the day, everyone's going to have the degree if they stay in school. Everyone's going to be working to continue to become better performers. But what is going to separate you from the student at Murray State or the student at Truman? You know, because when you have your music as a degree, what is going to separate you in the interview process? What is going to separate you on the scene when you get there and you want to, when you're working on trying to get into the scene in terms of performing? Those are the type of things that I really make a huge effort to make sure that that's a part of how I teach. Also implementing a lot of diversity and inclusion in my teaching. For me, that's not a buzzword. That is something that I feel very strongly about. And students that come from areas like this is very similar to how I grew up, rural areas. And so you might not be exposed to as much as someone who might have came from a bigger metropolitan area. So I've taken some of my life experiences and I make sure that I pour that into students. And so I hope, you know, it is my hope that they take away from it, yes, he's looking at me being a better person, you know, and having a more comprehensive education rather than being able to just associate pitches and rhythms and being able to pass tests, because that's great and that's fine. But when you get into the classroom, you know, I always have this thing, if my kids were to go into music, you know, you might be the person teaching my child. Right? And so I want you to be the best version of yourself so that way you can, you know, offer varied teaching modalities and different ways to be able to reach students from different backgrounds or students who see things a little differently. I hope that answers your question in regards to that.
So many follow-ups, but I'll stop for a second. And George, did you have something? Yeah,
so you mentioned that, you know, you really got really into trombone, knowing that it was your thing, I would say in 11th grade, right?
Yes.
But you, so you were going through this problem where the old mouthpieces were giving you, you know, allergic reaction. What kept you going with it prior to knowing that you really, really loved it? I mean, what was the thing that kept you in it whenever, I mean, if I had allergic reactions every time I played an instrument, I'd be like, I think this probably isn't for me. What kept you going?
Yeah, it wasn't a every time I played thing, but it also combats with stress, or it combats with the weather, or just you're rubbing metal on your face, and so those sorts of things. So it wasn't something like the mouthpiece that I play on here. It's a metal mouthpiece, and so what I've learned now in my older age is that to combat that is I make sure that I clean the mouthpiece every time that I play it.
Okay.
That was a really big thing. I make sure that I take a look at the metal, make sure there's no nicks or no cuts in it, those sorts of things. But what kind of kept me motivated was it was one of the things that I felt where I could be a creative. I felt as though I could be, I felt as though that I could add value to, and I also enjoyed the fact whereas I could collaborate with others. So it was the team aspect, but it was also the duality of being able to say, well, I can create, I can do these things. And I think that's kind of really stuck with me because I have to play in a variety of musical genres because I have so many different influences. And so I have to do that because that's like a part of me. And if there ever gets to a point where I'm not doing the things that truly make me happy, I will definitely pivot and I will adjust to make sure that I can be in a space and I can do things that create those type of things that ultimately make me happy. And ultimately where I can hopefully, make some kind of impact or inspire someone while continuing to kind of nourish the things that kind of keep me going. So it was a bunch of things. And there was also, me, I also have like a little chip. So, it was also somebody was like, man, well, maybe you need to give that up. And I love that. And so when you tell me that, you didn't blew it. You didn't blew it, right?
Pushes you a little harder,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So when you didn't told me that, I mean, it doesn't work like that for all people, but for me, I'm one of those people, when you tell me I can't do something, now I gotta do it and then show you the receipt after I do it. And, and just kind of enjoy the process of doing it. It's not to prove anyone wrong, but it's to make sure that I am staying true to who I am, and to realizing that, I have this hat in my car. It says, just a kid from Jarrett, Virginia, that I keep in my, it's a very small town, much smaller than Cape. And that's very important to me because everywhere that I've been, internationally, nationally, everybody that I've played for, when I come home, the people still, I won't tell you my nickname, but the people still relate to me as that. And that's really important to me because those people, how they say it takes a village. Those people really poured into me and really helped me in all avenues of my life. So I'm not just doing this for myself and for my family now and my children. I'm doing it for people who have really invested a lot of time and a lot of energy to help me get to where I am today. That's pretty important to me.
I wonder if we can back up to that a little bit because you brought up your upbringing a few times, and I'd kind of like to know more about that. So you just told us the small town you were from. Can you paint us a picture of Jarrett, Virginia, and that community, your musical household?
Very small town. I'm trying to see what it's similar to. Might be smaller than Perryville.
I started to say, I grew up in a town of 299 people.
We had a little more than that.
So I'm kind of the bar for small town.
Yeah, we had a little more than that. Well, actually, we had an area that we would pass by on my bus. It was called Dootlam, and it was population 13 in Dootlam. Yeah,
I'm a metropolis compared to that.
Yeah, for sure. But it was a really cool area because there was diversity there. One of my best friends, he's Roy Flynn. He's white, and he's like one of my best friends to this day. His dad actually owned the hardware store that we worked at. And so it pretty much goes deep, but my parents were always very well liked in the community. My dad was a Vietnam vet. My mom that worked for the grocery store, so she did, manager stuff until my dad, could no longer work, and then she became caretaker for him. But my parents were very well liked in the area, and people knew who I was. So I couldn't just go anywhere and act a fool because somebody would grab me up and be like, I know your parents, I know Bird and Helen. Okay, what you doing? Okay. And so that's kind of what it was. But it was a really beautiful situation because where I went to school was like 20 minutes away. It was in Emporia, Virginia. And so it was a very, I'm very fortunate because I had a pretty diverse upbringing. It was one high school, one middle school, one elementary school. So everybody that I went to school with from a youngin', I grew up with. And I knew their parents, and their parents knew me. And I knew my friends' parents, and and it's still like that to this day. So if something happens to one of their parents, it's like they didn't hit me, and I'm like, yo, what's up? Mom, I can't make it, but I need you to go to the wake, or I need you to go to the hospital. We need to check on so and so and so. So it was very, a very supportive community. And I think my mom and dad kind of knew I was one who wanted to do my thing, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do the world. And so they were very supportive. Again, like I said, I have very hardworking parents, but my parents were the most supportive parents ever. When I went to school, they did whatever they could do to make sure that all I had to do was focus on going to school.
Were you a first generation college student?
My brother went, but he dropped out. And then he went into the military, and then he came back and he finished school, and he's in the military. He's doing very well in the military. He just left being stationed in Germany. Now he's stationed in Savannah. But he took that from my dad. All of us saw that. And so pretty much, it was me trying to figure out what college was, how to navigate those things, how to deal with being out there on my own, because my parents couldn't necessarily answer some of the questions that I needed to know in terms of college because they didn't know. And so the one thing that I love is when I finished my bachelor's, my mom started at Southside Community College, finished school. Then she went to Virginia State University. And so it was like she saw me going to school. Mom didn't need to go to school, but she did it because she wanted to. And then she, became a paralegal and started working in legal stuff, and she just kind of blossomed from there. But I think it's funny how life does this sometimes. I was kind of setting the tone for her in that instance, where I was kind of showing her how to do this. And my whole life, she and he had been showing me how to do those sorts of things. And so that was a really fantastic exchange to be able to kind of understand that. But we didn't really have the college thing. I didn't know anything about the social aspect or anything of it. But I will let you know I took full advantage of my college years. And I tell my students too, you only have a limited amount of time in college. You need to enjoy your time in college, be respectful, handle your business, but enjoy these moments, because when the real work starts, it starts. And so I will say that I took full advantage of my college opportunities, and it was amazing. I loved every aspect of it. And I'll leave it right there.
I was trying to say, there's probably stories there we could get into with your guard down, since you haven't had much sleep. But so I'm curious, you said that they were very supportive, but you'd also said, you know, the $137 for the trombone wasn't in the budget. So when it came to college, was that something you always wanted, or was that an expectation they had that, you know, our children are going to do this, even though we may not have had that opportunity?
Yeah, my dad just had a, high school education, but did very well in the military as well as the Department of Corrections. I was playing it by ear. I had a mentor who, and this is just how people are placed in your life, and I kind of think it's a true thing. My band director my junior year became very close with my family, and really kind of showed me what I could potentially do with music. He had played with Ellington, and it was like a pretty big deal. And I was like, man, I like this cat. He's, really good guy. And then when I get to school, I went to Norfolk State, and that's where he had went to school. And, when I get to school, I started looking at fraternities, and I started researching fraternities. And then, when I go looking at the charter members of the fraternities, he is a founding member of the fraternity I joined, of the chapter. And he never forced it on me. It's just like how it happened was just super organic. And he could have been like, yeah, when you go to school, I want you to, think about this. I had no idea, living in Jared and living in Emporia, I didn't know anything about that. I knew like some of my teachers were a part of Black Panhellenic fraternities and sororities, but to me, it didn't mean anything at that level because I just did not know anything about it. And so he was just kind of inspiring me to say, hey, maybe you should look at school. My parents always said, you're going to do something. You're going to go to school, or you're going to go in the military. You know what the military is because your dad's done it. So that was an option. And then I was also thinking, well, maybe I could do the band in the military. So that was a very big option. And even throughout my doctorate, that never stopped, because I was like, yeah, I could, I haven't aged out. Like, I still haven't aged out. And so I'm like, well, these are options in order to be able to do it I wanted to do. And I said, well, I'm going to try college. And I applied to 3 schools. I got into those schools. And on that $137 trombone, never had an applied lesson. And I got a scholarship, and I went, and I was just really figuring it out as I came. But I'm very thankful that, I'm a believer. And so God placed the right people around me to kind of guide and kind of order, because like I said, I enjoyed college, but I had people around me kind of like the bumpers in bowling, to kind of be like, all right, you coming, you drifting off a little bit. We need you to kind of stay on task. And so I didn't know it was going to be a thing. But it was ultimately a really great decision for me. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to go and become more educated and kind of learn more, not only about the field of music, but ultimately my undergrad experience, I learned a lot about myself and what I wanted to do, and how I learned how to be an individual. Going to a historically Black university, that's why I'm dressed up every day. That was the thing. You dress up, you're sharp, you come in, you work hard. That's just part of my DNA right now. And so I'm very thankful for that. And that kind of helped. And as I went through that, then I started looking at different schools. But I was very intentional Queen Tanya. I was very intentional about the schools that I went to and why I went to them. So I went to a historically Black university. Then I said, okay, great. If I'm going to do this seriously, how am I going to be the best educator for my students? So I said, okay, great. I want to go to a conservatory that's private where I am not the overwhelming majority. And it was 3 of us, 3 Black folks. And I said, I want to know what that feels like so when I have a student that are dealing with a marginalized community. And I started really early thinking about this. How can I navigate? Because I'm a firm believer, I can't tell you how to navigate something if I've never been through it.
Sure.
You dig? And, because other than that, I'm just kind of blowing hot air. And so then when I was done with that, I said, I really want to go to a really big university and just kind of bring all of those things together. And then I chose West Virginia University, but it was the teachers that I chose. It was the areas that I chose. So I was very intentional. It was the degrees that I chose because I wanted those things to make me a better teacher. And it has suited me very well, especially at a place like Southeast, where we have a lot of specialized people, but I also have a lot of secondary areas, which really makes it an asset, in my opinion, to be able to do different things to help students in some different ways. And so I'm very thankful for those, but I'm really glad I had a mentor to kind of say, hey, we want you to be as marketable and as knowledgeable as possible. And so that's kind of how college worked for me.
So would you say that you are comfortable on just about every instrument that is played on this campus? Or how does that work with comfort level for folks that have your amount of training in music?
I teach trombone. And since I also play jazz, I play a little bit of piano, to make sure that I can, get around that and understand voicings. I also play euphonium, but I also play a little bit of tuba. So my first job in 2014, I was ABD, and my first job was at not my first full-time job, was at Treasure Valley Community College in Ontario, Oregon. And when I got there, I had a tuba student, an upright bass student, and a drum set. And they said, can you start a jazz ensemble?
Like, this is it. Yeah, we've got it. So
I did some really heavy lifting, but it also stretched me the most. And I'm 100% confident in saying that's where I learned how to teach any student, because I had students that had resources, students that didn't have resources, things where I was maybe like 2 weeks ahead of students because I had to learn something to stay ahead of them. That's where I really kind of cut my teeth and kind of figured out how to navigate this thing. But no, in terms of the instruments, it's low brass for me, but specifically trombone, euphonium, and, some keyboard skills, some piano skills.
Okay.
I have a horrible confession to make to you that you're never going to let me live down.
Okay.
Until I had met you, I'd never heard of euphonium.
Yeah, that's why I kept saying it all the time.
And now I know a euphonium player, and I tell everybody that, and they all look at me like they don't know.
And Katie just kept saying it over and over and over. I was like, oh my God, this is like a new word. This is like
You're very excited by this.
Do you tell people, Tanya, that you have a favorite euphonium player?
Of course. I mean, don't you, George? I mean, you do now.
I do now. I mean, yes.
Which means sweet-toned instrument, euphonium. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like Euphoria, euphonium. Okay, I get it. Yes. Oh, wow. Look at this. I'm learning. This is great. I feel
educational.
You are a great teacher. I knew it.
You've told us about this passion for music, but when you got to college, how did you know teaching was going to be the way that you were going to use it?
I didn't. I don't think I figured that out until late junior year. senior year. But there were just, I'm very thankful. We had some really fantastic educators at Norfolk, and they went to really, really great, fine schools. But the amount of effort that they poured into me and the amount of extra stuff they allowed and the amount that they gave us is really kind of unheard of at some places. You know, I've been at, you know, some places where they're in and then they're out. When they're out, they're out. And that's fine. You know, that's kind of the deal. But my students, you know, there was none of my teachers that I could not call at that time. We weren't really quite texting in 2002. But I could call, I could show up at their office, I could knock without making an appointment, and it would always open a door. And then I would have a teacher, you know, my applied teacher, who gave me the keys to his office, you know, so I could come in and I could do the things that I need to do. And I've kind of adopted that. And so just kind of seeing people who really had a passion for helping others. And it was clear. It wasn't a, I'm doing this for the money. I'm doing this for my ego to make people think so much more. They truly did it because it was important to them. And so once I saw that really kind of connected with me. And I said, you know, I had a teacher that says, you know, Joe, Joseph, you're going to do some really cool stuff. And I didn't even catch this, but he said, you're going to do some really cool stuff in your life. But he said, you know, remember when you get across the fence to throw the rope back over. And that's always stuck with me, because sometimes when you're climbing, you go across and you don't think about those who, because you're like, oh, I'm not there anymore, so I don't really have to worry about it. But there are students, there also are peers, there are also, you know, people that you deal with who are trying to do those sorts of things. And so if it wasn't for the people that threw the rope back over for me to grab on, I don't know where I would be. And so for me, it is my life's work to make sure that I do the same thing, because you cannot forget those moments that helped you. And I'm a firm believer, nobody makes it to where they are at any point without a little bit of help from someone else. And that's the one thing that we easily tend to forget sometimes when we get caught up in what we're doing, or when the ego gets involved. We all have a little bit of that. My dad used to call that, he said, that's when you're edging God out. When you got the ego, you're edging God out right now. And so it's extremely important to utilize ego to assist, but not to tear down, you know, because you need to have a certain amount of confidence when you're doing your thing. But I think helping people in that analogy that they gave me has just really always kind of stuck with me. Yeah.
It's excellent. Yeah, I really love that, because, you know, we were all where that student is, or where that new staff member is, or, you know, each of those things. So yeah, that's excellent.
Absolutely.
I try to think of that whenever I meet new people at the university who've, you know, maybe older than me, more tenured than me, but they're new to SEMO. I'm like, well, I've been here for 16, 17 years. I know how things work here. And it's really easy to just forget that, like, oh yeah, you probably need to know who this is. So yeah.
Yeah. And then on the other piece of that, it also takes humility to be willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you help me? And that is extremely important, that we are humble and we know how to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Yeah, I got a doctorate, but you're pretty smart on that. And so me, I try to be around people that not add value, but people where I can learn from and continue to advance. And then as well as make sure that I am contributing somewhere in this process, because I think it's, all of our students, they have so many instances of things that they're dealing with outside of us when they're in their class. They have their own personal things that they're dealing with. They have their class issues that they're dealing with. So our job is to kind of see how can we navigate and be there to help them when they come to us with those issues. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. It's kind of my philosophy.
Part of getting back to that, I think, with helping your students with what they're going through, you mentioned making your educational choices so that you experience different things. So what was it like making that transition and going to a school in where you were one of only 3 Black students?
I was totally fine, because my parents had raised me to be good to everybody, and to realize that everybody might not be good to you, and that's okay. But you, guess what? You say, God bless you, and keep it moving. And you keep doing your thing. And so where there are issues, do I still have issues? Absolutely. But I think it's how you respond to those issues and just being in there. And I think the biggest thing for me is my parents always wanted me to be in places and situations that would stretch me the most, instead of being in a place where I knew I could handle that. I didn't necessarily know at each one of those stages if I was going to do it, but it stretched me to grow. And it really pushed me to kind of take some steps that I might not have taken had I not have taken those opportunities. So being there, it was probably one of the best experiences that I had in my college experience. Each one of them had their sweet spots, but going to the conservatory was pretty amazing. So imagine the River campus, but the conservatory on campus is like the main campus is all River campus. It's all that.
Sure.
So I'm dealing with, people who are from so many different backgrounds, and, and they're serious about what they want to do, I cut on my TV and I see my friends I went to school with on commercials, or they're doing The Waitress with Al Roker in New York, and they're doing other things. And I sent them a text message, hey, you're killing it. And we were just, drinking margaritas, in 2008, and having fun. But those experiences was monumental for me, just in terms of really opening my eyes to what was possible. And did I find roadblocks when I was there? Did people tell me, oh, no, you can't do classical and you can't do jazz. You got to pick a side and you got to do that. Well, sucks for you, but I'm going to work to do both. Those things were extremely important. And I was able to find like-minded individuals that were as convinced that they wanted to do this and they wanted to pursue this. As, we all know the arts is it's a hard field. And if, the thing is, well, what's the last thing you've done? You're as good as the last thing you've done. What have you done lately? Not what have you done 5 years ago. And so I try to stay, and I learned that being there, it's not the fact that you want to be busy. I hate saying it. People say, oh, I got to be busy. I got to be busy. No, I don't want to be busy. I want to be productive, and I want to be creative. Because as a creative, as an artist, that's kind of what we do. When we stop doing that, life stops being fun. It's for me. I can only speak for me. So being in that space kind of empowered me. it stretched me in ways that I did not know I could grow. And I'm very thankful for it.
Excellent. So do we get a chance at one Joseph Jefferson college fun story? You said you made the most of the fun in college. I want to hear one of those.
One?
Well, I mean, unless you want to go for more, but
what do you mean
choose
fun?
wisely.
No, please define. What do you mean by fun?
What did you really enjoy? What made college fun for you, and what kinds of things did you do to make college fun for yourself outside of the classroom? The thoughtful face for those of you who can't watch this.
Now the smile that's just crossed his face.
I don't know this. I was Mr. Norfolk State.
Oh, all right.
And that was an actual pageant that was in conjunction with the state pageant, which leads to Miss America. So it was heavy. It was heavy deal. So I won every category except bodybuilding, because at that time I just was, I was real thin, but I won everything else. I won dress, speech, talent. I got the trophies.
When you say pageant, I can't help but think that your mom is being in the background, like one of those pageant moms saying, "Smile."
Well, no, because this was something that my parents never did. They were
sure.
Like, "Boy, I'll support you," but I don't know nothing about that. And fun fact, when I did that Mr. Norfolk State pageant, and I was on stage, I'll eat up the audience, when they're out there. And for example, doing the fitness thing, I had no muscles. So I'm around guys that are like, they're clearly on steroids. I'm just messing with you. They were way bigger than me, but they were working out. I was in the band, so I was real lean. It was pretty active. And so I go out there and I'm flexing. I'm like doing all the poses, but I have absolutely no muscle. Come to find out, 6 months later, my mentor tells me, Terry Venable, she says, "I want you to get certified to judge pageants because it's quite lucrative, actually. I think, you could be fantastic in doing it." So this is the time I'm actually, maybe it's a little longer than that, but I'm in my master's at this time. Yeah, I'm in my master's. So it's a couple of years past. And so she says, "Come down, do this." So I come down and I do that. And then when I get there, she was like, "I want you to stay the night because there's someone I want you to meet." I said, "What you talking about?" I'm like, "I'm in my master's. So, like, what? I'm free as a bird right now. Okay, right? Okay." And she said, "Yeah, there's this young lady that I want you to meet." Fast forward, the young lady who was in the audience, who went to another school, is now my wife. And she was like, "Yeah, I remember you. You was just bony. You thought you was all that. You thought you was all that, flexing your muscles. You didn't have no muscles." And she was like, "But you was just so funny." And so that was a story. Once again, I just don't know how this stuff kind of works. When I met her, she was, what's the appropriate way to put this in the podcast? You gotta
tell me.
She was involved. She was engaged.
Oh.
And so we met, and I was working at the Marriott doing night audit in my master's to make a little extra money. And I gave her my card when I was there because everybody was all on her, And I was like, "Here's my card." And at that time, I had my face on my card. I was like, "This is who I am. I play trombone." Boom. And I'm sleeping for the night audit, and she calls. She was like, "Are you asleep?" I'm like, No, I ain't sleep. Listen, I got drool all on my face. I am so sleep. Okay. I got to work 11 to 7. Yes, I'm sleep. Okay. And so I talked to her all night. And then 3 weeks later, we're dating.
At what point during this did she break off her engagement? I got to know the scandal.
Couple weeks, the ring went back to him. I was like, I can't keep coming back down here. What you call them? But I asked a couple key questions because I'm country, she's country. I said, you know, how long you been engaged? Do your parents like them? And the big one, have you picked out a wedding dress? It was like 2 years, no and no. I said, what
you said this had a time limit, right? With or without you.
I said, but the big thing was the parents didn't like it because where I'm from, the parents are a big deal. Like,
oh yeah,
you know, I still, you know, I don't know how people do it today, but I went to my in-laws and asked. Like, that was a really big deal for me. It wasn't just like we just doing our thing, because I wanted to make sure that this thing was happening, and it did. And I met her through, and I had no idea she was in the audience. I had no idea she went to another school I'd never seen a day before in my life. So that is one of the more happier and the more you know, notebook moments that she loves. She thinks about it all the time of how that happens. And so that's a testament to say you never know how what you do will affect you at some other point in your life. And so that's one of my quick little stories of how I found my little flower. And she has followed me across the United States and given me 2 cute little babies that I love so much. And she is so supportive with what I do. And Lord knows you need a supportive person in our field. You know,
sure.
You definitely do. And so that's one of my stories. That's the story I'm going to give you. I'm going to leave it at that point.
I feel like you chose a good one. I like that one. That's a great.
So I have a couple of music questions for you too, because I'm curious, you know, you mentioned classical and you mentioned jazz. You're the director of jazz studies here. Has that always been the leading passion, or did that just kind of come from that first job?
Well, I think a drive for, you know, I had really good teachers in undergrad who showed me in their teaching to have an appreciation for all music types, all cultures. And it was just so important. And my first job, you know, I was the director of instrumental ensembles, but I was also the director of jazz ensembles. So I was over everything. At the community college, it kind of looked a little different. So I was just kind of overseeing all the groups, but I was also the director of jazz. And throughout my experiences of being a sideman and, you know, playing and performing, and just really having some really fantastic jazz opportunities, it was always a piece of me. And it was something that I was never going to compromise. That was a part of my development as a person, just like I will never compromise the symphonic piece. I would never compromise the wedding bands I played in. I would never compromise the 70 bands I played in when I wore sequins with bell bottoms and the top. I won't show you those pictures, but I do have those pictures.
Oh, they're out there somewhere. We know it.
I won't send those.
We'll find them, Joseph.
Yeah. And so it was all of those kind of experiences that I kind of wanted to help kind of cultivate and kind of inform the decisions that I make. So jazz was very much a part of my life, and I've had some just wonderful opportunities of learning this music, and not just learning it from a note and pitch relation, but just kind of dealing with it culturally. And that's a missing piece. For some of the stuff that we do, you kind of have to live with it. And I tell my students, I said, regardless of what type of music you're listening to, it could be Dvorak, it could be Brahms, it could be Beethoven, it could be Wynton, it could be Terence Blanchard. You kind of got to live with this music. It's just like moving to a place and only speaking that language or learning that language. How do you assimilate? How do you get into that culture? And so that was something that was really important to me. And I think that has been very beneficial in my teaching, in my openness of thought, and how I kind of have an appreciation for what everybody does. Because all of this, and at the end of the day, I tell my students, good music is good music, regardless to what it is. When I was in West Virginia, I remember graduating from West Virginia. Again, like I said, my mom never saw me on these aspects, but every home game, we sang Country Roads. At graduation, we sang Country Roads. And so I graduate, walk across the stage, and she said, "Boy, you over there singing Country Roads?" I said, "Yeah." That is what we sang here. And she was like, "Oh, I did not know." And and so it was an appreciation and submerging myself in that culture. And now that is very near and dear to me when I hear that song, because I can think about, the mountains in West Virginia and all of those things that are a part of who I am today. So I never take for granted all of the experiences that kind of helped me kind of get to where I am.
Well, speaking of where you are, you mentioned your lovely wife being so supportive. And it's not just a teaching schedule we're talking about. And so some of our alums might not realize that you're a faculty member, but you're also still a performer. And I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that and that experience too.
Well, it's a very, it requires a lot of discipline and a lot of planning. Here at Southeast, I teach trombone and euphonium, and now I'm teaching 14 students. These are individual lessons, hour-long lessons, and then I'm running the 2 jazz ensembles. I'm running the jazz festival. I'm collaborating with theater, with Big Band Christmas Jukebox. I collaborate with theater, dance, vocal, and vocal for Christmas Jukebox for Celebrate the Arts. We do the trombone day here, and I teach low brass methods, as well as advise. So in addition to those things, I'm still trying to carve out time to perform. So for example, like I told you yesterday, I was in North Carolina. I got up at 6:30 because we had a rehearsal at 8. I taught a class there. We recorded. It's an all women's music festival. It's called the Dark Water Festival. So we recorded works by all women composers, which I absolutely love. And it was great. And I got on the road about 2:30 p.m., drove from North Carolina here, got here about 2:30 this morning. And then my first student was at 8:30 this morning. And so today, my schedule ends at 7 p.m.
That's quite the thing.
Today.
That's a lot.
And normally, normally when we look at my schedule, I'm normally here. I'm normally here till about 6:30. I normally get here about 8. I'm normally here till about 6:30. But what I try to do is I try to make sure that I'm making time to, number one, keep my performing up, continue to grow, continue to do things that are going to help the community in terms of performing in the area, in terms of trying to represent the university as well as myself in the best light, and just doing different things. This month has been outrageous. for me. The first, we played at Katie's. The second, we did the K-Rail Jazz Festival. The second week was in South Carolina, playing with Vanessa Williams. Then we did a Masterworks concert that Saturday. The following weekend, I played with Paducah Symphony. This week, I went to North Carolina to do the Dark Water Festival. Sunday, I'm playing with Jerry Ford at River Ridge Winery. And so it has been a busy time, but it's very rewarding. And I think it really means a lot to the students to not only see you talking about those things, but to see you actually doing those things.
Sure.
And still maintaining a level of commitment to them, to make sure that although I'm busy and I'm doing these creative things, because you have to do these things for tenure, and you also have to do these things for my creative pursuits, that you still give them everything that they deserve and more, because they're here. And they deserve that. And again, because someone did that to me. And so it's extremely important that you balance things out. September was a little nutty for me because COVID was up, and I was like, man, we got to do some stuff. But like, so far, I mean, this year, I've been accepted into 5 different festivals. I'm performing with 2 different large ensemble groups. I'm going to perform a bunch throughout this year. My jazz combos booked and busy. So I'm thankful for those things, but all of those things, I'm very intentional to make sure that those things are helping me as a performer, as a teacher, and those experiences are experiences that I can bring back and share with my students. So is it easy? Absolutely not. And does everyone's schedule look like mine? No, they have they're different things that kind of drive them and do them. But for me, it is quite hectic. But I do see the payoff. I'm definitely going to take a break after this week.
It seems like you deserve it. Yeah.
Because I haven't really seen my family much. And so I owe Mrs. Jefferson a spa day for keeping the kids so much. I owe her that and some time alone. So yeah, but to answer that question, yeah, definitely. I try to make sure that I manage both of them, because just teaching alone is not meeting all the requirements for me. You know, there's different things that make us up. And so there's the performing piece, there's the outreach, that is huge. That is the, are you representing marginalized communities in the stuff that you do? Not saying that you're doing that, but actually doing it. So for me to be able to perform pieces of women composers that no one knows about, or no one, that is not talked about, that's important for me, you know? And so, because if not me, then we're waiting on someone else to do that. And so I just try to do those things and make sure that I'm not spreading myself too thin, in addition to, you know, all of the wonderful things that I get asked to do on campus, the different committees that I get asked to be a part of.
Well, speaking of things that you are a part of, and you mentioned it just a moment ago, the jazz festival, I pulled it up over here just because I was like, well, I don't know when that's going to land coming up. And that's in February, the 4th through the 5th of
Correct.
2022, right?
Correct.
So what time does that start? And how does that kind of run?
From about 8 a.m. till about 5:30 p.m. with full of bands. And then that Friday night is the gala concert with the guest artists. And then from about 8 a.m. to about 5 p.m. on Saturday, nonstop, with just bands coming in. There's clinics, there's performances, we have adjudicators. So that's a really busy weekend for the students that are participating with jazz. But it's a wonderful opportunity to get students on our campus, to showcase the wonderful facilities that we have, to showcase what we're doing here at Southeast in terms of with jazz, and really just kind of continuing this tradition that was here prior to me, and seeing what things that I could potentially add to it to push it forward. I think that's forward motion is a huge thing that we have to continue to work on.
Definitely. Yeah.
I I think that you've done a really great job of combining some of those personal performing experiences you have and ways to benefit your students, and not just what that gives you creatively, but I mean, you've used your contacts to provide master classes for your students. And so you knowing all of these famous musicians actually benefit students at Southeast.
So many, you know, and I owe people a lot of bourbon for, you know, some of the favors, you know, my fraternity brother, you know, Vincent Gardner, who is, you know, lead trombone and jazz at Lincoln Center. He did a master class for us when COVID hit. I mean, what greater opportunity to be able to have that, as well as the numerous people that I've had in terms of the studio. Last year we had, you know, pound for pound, one of the authorities on euphonium, Dr. Demondre Thurman, who's probably regarded as one of the best euphonium players in the world. And, you know, he was here giving a master class. Well, he did trombone euphonium day last year for us on the strength of, you know, our friendship. And so I don't take those things lightly. All of the guest artists that we've had here, you know, we have a very modest budget. And so it doesn't hurt knowing some people that will be able to come here, but not just getting names to come here, getting people who are true educators and who will be able to work with our students and help our students advance and succeed. That's super important to me, you know, that, you know, I don't just try to bring in the biggest name that I can get, but I also want to bring in a big name that can also help our students expound beyond what we have here. And that's important. And so I try to utilize those things, and I try to continue to do that. Like I said, you know, my father-in-law, he always said there's no big I's, no little U's. And that's kind of how I feel. You know, if I truly want to go and just do my thing, then I can just go do my thing. But you know, I think that I'm very intentional about how I utilize friends and how I incorporate that with my students, because ultimately we want them to grow, and they are they're the spokesperson when they leave here for Southeast, right? And so if they can have those experiences and have those type of people coming here to Southeast Missouri, those people probably would not have come here. They probably would have came to a bigger area, but not necessarily here. They could have. But I think it's important as a student that our students have those opportunities. There's no reason why they shouldn't have those opportunities as opposed to another area.
Most
and
definitely.
So if I can, and if we can definitely make it happen collectively as a department, I try to do those sorts of things to kind of keep them involved and engaged.
Excellent. Yeah, it's important. We thank you for it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you currently listening to for fun? Not just, I know you listen to music at all times probably, but what's the last thing you listen to for fun?
It's kind of heavy, and I'm, you know, absolutely, you know, I love Robert Glasper. If you all are not familiar with Robert Glasper, you should really get into him. Pianist.
Pulling it up now.
And just how he plays, it's pretty remarkable, and the sounds and the way that he uses his upbringing in the church to kind of just really create some really fantastic collaborations. And he does a lot of stuff with hip hop artists as well. And it's just kind of, he's just using so many different things. So that's what I'm listening to. Sia Charles, this young trombonist, woman trombonist. She's amazing. She's just been a really bright spot for me to listen to lately. And in terms of music, you know, I'm kind of just listening to everything that I'm preparing for as well. I'm reading a new book, How to Be Act Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. Have you heard that book?
I have not.
Have you heard of Jay Shetty?
I don't know that I have.
If you look him up, I'm pretty sure you've seen one of his, it's called Think Like a Monk. I'm pretty sure you've seen one of his little things on Instagram or Facebook that has come up.
Oh yeah.
Very motivational. You've seen him before.
I've seen this guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so his book is super cool. It's talking about how to remain positive and kind of working your purpose. And so that's been really kind of thought-provoking and figuring out how can I utilize some of those things to assist me as a teacher, as an individual, as a husband, as a family man, as a son, and how I do it. And so I've really been loving this book so far. That's what I'm reading so far, right now, currently.
I've learned a lot today. I know what euphonium means. I just found a book to read.
There you
found
go.
Some new people to listen to. This is great. I'm having a great day.
This has been very productive for George and I. We have all kinds of cool things to check out now.
That's actually really why we're doing this. We just wanted to find out cool things from cool people. So
well, I'm very thankful that you all reached out to me. I don't consider myself special by any means, but I definitely enjoy just the opportunity to just share and talk with people. That's kind of important to me, and really have meaningful conversations.
Well, I consider you special, Joseph Jefferson.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your time. We probably should let you go, though I still have billions of questions. I feel like we could talk to you all day long, but I know we don't all have endless amounts of time either. So, and you probably might like to get a nap in at some point today.
Well, that was doing this break. So that's not happening. I have a 12:30 coming in. This young scholar, Sam, is coming in to play some bass trombone. So yeah, and like I said, if this doesn't work out for your practice, let me know, and we can kind of figure out something else. And I'd love to help, but I think this would be really cool, and for our students, as you all try to do different things to kind of keep them engaged. That's one thing I've always kind of liked about, serving on the committees and marketing. You all are trying to kind of be forward thinking. And offer varied ways to connect with our students, alumni, and faculty. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I thank you very much. Again, we think you're pretty cool. You're one of our favorite people, and we appreciate you sharing all of your stories with us today.